Gosh, okay. I'm supposed to talk to you guys about what we do in my lab with social anxiety in 5 minutes. Oh, I mean, that doesn't seem like enough time, and I'm not sure I practice enough. And, well, okay, so this is what people experience when they experience social anxiety. That's right. So, when people experience social anxiety, they typically are experiencing these thoughts about, I'm not going to come across that well, or other people are going to judge me negatively, or I'm going to be embarrassed or humiliated by this situation. That's right. So what I'm experiencing right now is common to when people experience social anxiety. Everyone experiences it from time to time. Well, almost everyone. There might be some people who don't experience it, but trust me, you don't want to run into them in a dark alley. So everyone experiences, for the most part, social anxiety from time to time, but some people experience it enough that it really becomes difficult for them. Most of what you do in daily life involves social interactions, so how are you going to live your life if you're afraid of those social interactions? So we want to try to help people who are having these sorts of fears, and some things we know can help a little bit. Things like learning relaxation techniques, learning how to think about your thoughts about the situation and maybe approach it a little more realistically. But there's one thing that works really well, and we've never yet found anything that definitely improves a whole lot above it. We found a few things that help, but without this thing, you really can't get too far. And that thing we call exposure. That might sound kind of extreme, but another way to think about it is practice. When you're afraid of social situations, one of the best things you can do is practice social situations. This works for pretty much all fears and most anxieties. If you're afraid of snakes that aren't dangerous, the best thing to do is to spend some time around snakes that aren't dangerous. Same thing with giving speeches or talking to people. Exposure tends to work really well. Um, in other forms of therapy, they might call it by a different word, but all forms of therapy for social anxiety that have definitely been shown to help involve some sort of practice of social situations. We know it works, but there are only a few things that we know definitely make it work even better. Why is that important? A lot of people benefit a lot from exposure and from treatments that involve exposure, but not everyone benefits. Some people, for example, are too afraid to even start doing the exposure. That's one issue. But another whole issue is that some people, even after they've gone through the exposures, are still pretty frightened and haven't benefited that much. So our question, one of the things that we tend to want to answer is, how do we add to exposure so that more people can benefit? We do a lot of studies where we're looking at what adds to exposure. In these studies, for example, everyone might come in and give a speech. Giving that speech is a form of exposure, a form of social practice. The real question is there anything we can add to that exposure so that in a second speech, people feel even better than people who only got the exposure? One example that we have taken a look at in several studies is the fact that a lot of people who are anxious about social situations, when they give a speech, think that they've done absolutely terribly. I mean, so badly, people just don't give speeches and look this bad, but people who are high in social anxiety are afraid that that's how they're coming across. And so, what do we do with those folks? Well, how about we show them how they actually did? We show them a video, for example, of how the first speech went. And it turns out that when people are really, really thinking they come across terribly badly, seeing a video seems to help a lot to reassure them so that when they start the next speech, right at the beginning of it, they tend to feel less anxious than people who didn't get to see the video. So that's an example of the kind of study we might do. Everyone comes into the lab, gives one speech. People are randomly assigned to two groups, one of which gets to watch the video of their speech, the other group does something else to fill the time, and then everyone gives a second speech. And when we do that, we find that at least for the people who think they look terrible to begin with, seeing the speech reduces how anxious they feel just as they're about to start the second speech. So that's the kind of study that we do. We try adding things to exposure that we think might help, and we hope that we'll be able to discover things that will help more and more people benefit from social practice, from exposure for social anxiety. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I at least feel better now than when I started this.